All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on podcast number 2. Last week we had some great conversations. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and go check it out. Want to throw this out there as we're on our way to our goal of hitting our podcast number. I'll reread the stat real quick. So 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3. That's 1.8 million who quit. And out of those 200,000 left, 90% of those will quit after 20 episodes. That's another 180,000 gone. And to be in the top 1% of podcasts in the world, you only need to publish 21 episodes of your podcast. So today is number 2 of 21, which is our first goal on the rise up. And there'll be
Bang,
more.
bang,
There'll be
bang, bang.
more ones after that, but this is where it started. So once again, it's going to be a weekly thing, and so just feel free to listen in. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. How you doing? I'm proud of us. 2 in a row, second
I
bite of
know.
the apple. We're tracking, man. We're tracking.
Yeah, exactly. We're everything's going in the right direction. We had a great conversation last time, dove deep on a couple of things. We'll probably do the same, dive deep on some different things today. And I apologize, guys, I'm having some technical difficulties. Camera's going out, but you can hear
Still
me.
going Harry
So
Potter on me into
I
the
know,
to the
man.
brick wall there. It's all
I
good.
know. Don't worry.
It's all right.
By podcast 21, this will be fully
Well,
fixed.
yeah, we have 19 more shots to get this right. It's all
Exactly.
good.
Hey, and that's kind of like, it's funny because like it's like starting a business, starting a like people that say they start a YouTube channel have done well with it. People that say they start podcasts or whatever is like the reason why so many so that number that I just read, I think the reason why like so many people quit along the way is they try to get so many things perfect, like right from the beginning. And it's just like their first one has to be like so perfect. It's like, man, it's the same thing as like writing a paper when you're in school. Like you're gonna have a really sloppy, like rough draft. And the first couple ones aren't gonna be that great, but like you just keep going and you figure it out along the way. I mean, if you go back and watch anybody's like first, like Joe Rogan's first podcast or anything, it's just like it's nothing like where it ends up, you know?
It's that I agree, Vince, but I think it's also it twofold depending on who it is. I think one is just kind of perfectionism, which is kind of paralyzing sometimes to just take action. But then also, I think it's just the effort, bro. I really do. A
Yeah.
lot of people, and I know this just from being a mentor and coach to a lot of different people. I get to see this quite a bit, and here's the thing, and this is probably going to suck to hear for a lot of people, but I hear from a lot of people where they're interested in starting a recruiting business, and so one of my things is I like to make it very clear that this is going to require work and effort, and this is not going to be easy. It is a real business. Like you're going to have to like step up and show up for yourself, and there are going to be things that go, and I've never had one person, not one person that I've said that to has been like, oh, well, in that case, then I'm probably out. I always get the like, yeah, man, no, dude, I'm a hard worker and I run through walls and nobody works harder than me and yada, yada, yada. And they hold that tone until it's time to do the work, until the effort kicks in. And then it's really hard for people to get there and just kind of go a little bit extra over. Um, and yeah, I think it's twofold. I saw a bunch of this when Hermosi dropped his $100 million leads. A lot of chatter in the interwebs of like, oh man, Hermosi is going to put out, marketing agents. He's going to put marketing agencies out of business and this, that, and the other. And everybody's probably shaking in their boots. And I never felt that way one bit. I mean, the possibility exists with the information that he's dropped there, but I know the human condition. And the human condition is that 95% of people are not like, they're going to read that book, they're going to high five and ass slap each other. They're going to put together an awesome plan, and then they're never going to do anything about it. Is what usually happens. So yeah,
I
I
know.
think it's
And it's unfortunate to say, but it's like I agree with you. I think we had that conversation early on. You caught it even before. I mean, you said that even before I had even really thought about it, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, oh man, if everybody starts doing this, it's gonna be a problem. But it's like I think you instinctively put too much like faith in humanity because okay, what Hermosi like did during that, and if you guys haven't watched that, what was it called again?
$100 million leads.
The $100 million leads like presentation that he did. It
Yeah.
was basically anybody listening to this, it's a masterclass in how to like give a presentation and just like everything. I highly suggest watching it if you haven't. It was awesome. Both Patrick and I were texting each other and watching it live at the same time from two different places. And you know, when you see it, it sounds like it's going to be really easy, right? But he tells you it's not going to be. But it, you know, that's part of the kind of the sell. You never want to be like, you're this is going to be like way harder than it looks. And so you put a lot of faith, I guess, into it being easier, and then you also like think that everybody's going to try. But then once you get into the work, it's like a lot of people, I guarantee you, dude, he has all that on there on his website for free, right? Yeah, you don't even have to create a login like you do on every other website and remember all the password and everything. You can literally just go on and watch it anytime. And I bet you, of the people that watch that presentation that have actually gone through the course, it's probably like such a small, just even watch, not only now have like not applied it, but even just watched it has probably just a huge landslide drop off, you know?
Yeah.
And so like, you know, and that just goes to business and
You
competition.
know that's a fact, Vince. You know
Yeah,
that's a fact because I don't hear any buzz about that book anymore. Like I've like it's end of October. The book dropped 2 months ago in August, and literally it's crickets. I don't hear anybody talking about $100 million leads anymore. And the lead up to it was like a year long, where people just couldn't stop talking about it. They couldn't keep it out. Well, now it's out there, and you would suspect that the people, if there really was the same amount of people that were as engaged into the buildup and then the actual release of what you're talking about, what he did in August, if those folks were actually out there implementing those things, you'd have a slew of new millionaires or folks tracking towards that, maybe not within 2 months, but some significant impact and wins from a lot of different people that you would probably be. And it's crickets, it's nothing. And that's because they got the book, they read it, they think they're super knowledgeable. And then when it came time to actually apply it, they didn't. So,
yeah, and a lot of it is like, you know, kind of if anybody listening to this doesn't know, Patrick has a course where he teaches people how to help with, you know, starting your own recruiting agency. It's great, by the way, check it out. But a lot of that is, you know, kind of some things that you cover in your course as well, like lead magnets and stuff like that. Because I, you know, I've gone through, I'll be honest, I haven't finished like the program that Hermosi put together, but I've gone through, you know, parts of it, and I try to listen to it every now and then. I have the book, but I a lot of times do better at least listening and watching the videos the first time, because he really kind of shows it.
yeah.
um but but yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff in there is really solid. But you know, I
It's
guess,
incredible. It's
yeah,
dude, it's incredible. There's some things that I think, at least with my own experience, especially like with cold email and a couple other things, like where it's probably generalized a little bit. And there's definitely like layers to that onion that he doesn't really deep dive in, at least in my experience, that
yeah,
landmines that you should be aware of and that sort of thing. But dude, there's tons of actionable things in there that really just require effort. It's binary. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. So yeah,
yeah. No, I agree with you, man. And one of the things that Hermosi himself talks about is like, you know, you see all those things, and I don't know if we talked about this last time on the podcast, or you and I were talking about quite a while before. But you know, he says like, for example, somebody brought up that statistic about the podcast. That's kind of where I got it from, the one that I said at the
okay.
beginning of this call. And he was like, when I hear those numbers and I hear that like X amount of people drop out and only a certain amount of people make it to podcast 21 and all that stuff, he's like, a lot of people, maybe some people may get discouraged by that, but it's like all I see is like opportunities. Like, so
Totally.
this many people just aren't willing to work hard. All I have to do is just be like, get here and beat this many people, and then, you know, I can get so much further than everybody else. And it's something that I think you and I talked about before too. We listened to Jocko as well, and like he talks about all the, I think it's Jocko and Dana White. Dana White
Dana White.
is the one that covers this too, but Jocko says it too. Where he's like, it's so easy to like beat everybody else right now, because it's just like so many people have gotten lazy, you know. Which,
Lazy and soft, man. Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah, but in all fairness, I completely agree with that. But when you get to Dana White status, sometimes it's like it's easier to think back on like it and be like, it wasn't that hard. But sometimes when you're in it, I do also understand how hard it seems, because you haven't really seen the other side of it quite yet. But that's part of it though. You have to have that mental, like, and again, I apologize, my camera's about to turn back on. You have to have that like mental, you know, I guess strength. I don't know what the best word would be for that, but like to be able to push through those really difficult times and believe in yourself and believe that, your business is going to work out. At the end of the day, if especially if you're starting a business or something like that, like you're betting on you. And there's always a solution. You're going to figure something out. It just may, when you're in the trenches and you can't see it, it's so difficult sometimes.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, and I would say out of the gate, and I don't think Dana White or any of those guys would ever tell you that, hey, getting launched and grinding through it and putting your chin strap on is easy by any means. I think they'd probably tell
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I don't think that's
it's
what you're
it's
saying either. I didn't mean to word it like that.
yeah, no,
But
you're good. I mean,
yeah.
but dude, I can't remember who said this, but I heard this quote one time, and I think it's just so spot on. It's an older guy, and he said the first million is really hard, like almost impossible. It's a grind. It's incredibly challenging. First million is hard. The second million is inevitable. And I would say that that is spot on. That's very, very true. Because once you have money, now your options for leverage through capital, not only human capital, but capital, money capital, just, man, it speeds everything up. It makes everything a lighter lift. And really at that point, it just becomes your ability to make decisions on pulling the trigger to take opportunities, assessing risk, and executing. That's it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something I know we're not planning on doing today, but we could do a whole podcast on getting to your first million. But let's save that for a different one. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely, I don't know. It's the journey up, and especially to get to there, and I guess that also depends on what your goal is too. I mean, you could probably, I mean, I don't know. I'm not at my first 10 million, so I can't really say this, but like, maybe if you're just not even thinking about your first million, just thinking about first 10 million, that could be a really difficult thing too.
Yeah.
So I guess it really kind of depends on, what your mindset is going in
No doubt. No
as well.
doubt.
So cool. Well, listen, man. First thing I really wanted to kind of cover today was so we're end of October, about to be Halloween. And we're coming to the end of this year. We're in Q4 right now. So I wanted to ask you, and I'll share some of my stuff as well, but like, how do you when you're with your business, how do you kind of like wrap up the year, like a year in general? Like, what are the things that you look into? How do you kind of like assess the lessons that you've learned that year? um I mean, even down to the numbers, metrics, everything that you kind of look into, your profits, all that kind of stuff. And then how do you use that to prepare for the following year? And then we'll kind of get into how to prepare for the next year too, or kind of just go from there.
Totally. Yeah. Super important exercise, in my opinion, for any leaders within businesses, whether you're an owner or, you're a C-suite executive for a company or you're a departmental manager or whatever. I think it's incredibly important to kind of go through this exercise every year and obviously do it ahead of time so that you have time to uh, understand and take note of some of the lessons learned, which I've got a little specific way that I like to go about that, which I'll share here in a second. And then also develop the strategy for going into the next year upcoming, which needs to happen before like the very last day of the year. Because usually with any kind of new strategy, not usually, sometimes there requires some other things that you need to do ahead of time in order to prepare to be able to execute efficiently and not come out of the gate super slow. New Year's are always, at least for me, are always about coming out hot, knowing exactly what we're doing. We got a purpose. And honestly, I'll make this comment and then we can circle back to it. That's something that kind of sidetracked me this year, was deviating. And we can get into the nitty gritty of that if we want, but that was a mistake that I made this year, where second month in, an opportunity presented itself unknowingly and I took it, which completely derailed everything else that I planned to do to accomplish this year. And so that was definitely a learning experience. But I like to always start this process with, we used to call it in the oil and gas industry, a postmortem of the year. So basically a review of what took place, good, bad, and ugly, as it aligns with the goals that we had set up coming into the year. Did we accomplish those? Did we not accomplish them? And then more importantly, why? And there's an awesome tool. Most of you probably know about it, but it's called SWOT. SWOT, and SWOT is an acronym, and it's a really cool tool. You can Google it. There's templates out there. There's YouTube videos on how to step through this process. But SWOT is an excellent tool to kind of help you facilitate a postmortem um, of whatever your current situation is and what's happened already, and then also give you some forward-looking guidance or insights on what you can take from that to help make the path forward better. And so the acronym stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so the idea is that you basically go through each one of those and say, okay, what were our strengths this year? What did we do really, really well? And so you list those things out. Obviously, your strengths, if it's something that you're strong in, is probably producing really positive results. And so the idea about strengths is, when you figure out what those things are, and also it's good to not to have an open conversation with multiple people about this so you can get different perspectives, because sometimes we don't see things super clearly and we have blind spots. And so it's always a healthy discussion to make sure that what you are seeing as a strength or an opportunity or weakness, whatever, is sound and sober to a couple of different perspectives of people that you trust and respect. But the idea here is,
when you say real quick, when you say speak with other people, do you mean other people within your own organization, or do you mean like mentors, or like what do you mean?
yeah, both inside and outside.
Okay.
Obviously inside, because they're going to have some visibility to the inner workings and, how that is actually being executed on the ground and, that sort of thing. And then also on the outside, customers, clients, people that are actually paying you and receiving your services or products or whatever it is that you're selling them. That's a great place to get some honest, hardcore feedback about what you're good at, what you're not good at, what could be better, all of that. And then other people that you respect that are kind of on the level, if you will. I really like talking to other business owners and subject matter experts, people that are subject matter experts in different components. Technology is a big one for our business, but really getting their perspective on, good, bad, ugly. But the idea here is that dialing in the strengths, the advantage of that is that you know what they are, that you don't change those, and maybe there are some things that you can take from what you do well and apply it to other things that you're not doing well, or opportunities to continue to enhance your strengths to get them to an even higher level. But really, really important to know those. People like to focus on problems, which is obviously important. We definitely need to fix problems, but there's also missed opportunities in not paying attention to your strengths and gleaning from those strengths what makes them strong. What is it about those things that you're doing that is making you awesome at it? Are there things about that you can apply to other areas that you're not so awesome in? And is there anything else that we can do more of that is really working really well to further increase those results and experiences that clients and customers are having working with us? So super, super important. The W, weakness. This is pretty straightforward. You want to call out the weaknesses, the gaps that you have in your business, things that you're not doing super well. Get them called out and make sure that you're aware of them and that they're clear. I mean, that's pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. But the reason this tool is so great is because even though it is very simple and it's obvious, it actually gives you a structure and a framework to sit down and really like, okay, I'm just thinking about what my weaknesses are here. You know what I mean? And really getting those lined out so you're aware of them. And then that will likely drive the next two, right? Your opportunities, which is the O, and your threats. That's usually going to come from, the majority of those will likely come from your weaknesses. And so that's kind of like the input to those. There's other things as well, strengths and maybe other outside variables that are kind of taking place that could impact opportunities and threats. But a lion's share of them are going to come from your weaknesses, because obviously those are things that we want to clear up and make better and turn into strengths. And so, opportunities are just that: opportunities to get better, opportunities to capitalize and make more money, opportunities to enter new markets, opportunities to hire somebody different. I mean, just whatever those opportunities are, they don't need to be pigeonholed into one category or another, but they do need to be defined across the board. And in my experience, what typically happens is, as you start identifying the different opportunities, when you really kind of sit down and take the time to think about it, you already know kind of surface level one opportunity that exists that's out there that you want to get defined. But then in going through that thought process and stepping through it, you start to uncover other opportunities. You're like, wait a second, like actually that might be that might be something we might want to take a look at, and that could be really something, and so on and so forth. And then the other thing too is it'll likely fit in several different buckets, like I was saying, like market opportunities, internal personnel and infrastructure opportunities, SOP opportunities, like all of that. And so to be able to separate them and use them later, because the idea here is that we're taking these things, we're able to step back and look at it holistically, and then from that use that information to develop the path forward for next year, right? And so it's really just kind of starting from solid footing, and then finally the T threats, things that are risk. That's basically it. What is the risk? If we don't dial in lead flow, we could go out of business because we won't acquire new customers. That's a threat that we probably need to triage and figure out pretty quickly. And so, yeah, I just really like that tool. It's super simple, and really kind of helps you get a view of the whole field before you kind of decide, okay, what are we going to do moving forward?
No, I mean, it's super solid. How long does it usually take you to do a SWOT analysis for your business?
I'll do it over the course of a couple days in different bites. I'm someone when I'm really kind of thinking about things super deep and things that are going to impact the next year or two or three or so on and so forth, or require major investment or pivots or whatever. I like to think about it, do a little bit, stop, then marinate, come back to it with a fresh mind. So it's usually over a few days where I'll time block and just kind of, okay, I have 2 hours, I'm going to knock out my strengths. And then if I feel good about that at the end of the 2 hours, I'll say, cool, tomorrow I'll come back and knock out weaknesses. If I don't feel good about it, then I'll allocate more time to it. Like, I feel like I'm still missing some things here. Tomorrow I'm going to come back and try to put a pin in that, or put a bow on that. So yeah, it just depends. But you want this activity to be meaningful. And so usually anything meaningful is not going to just be done in 20, 30 minutes. You know what I mean? So
For sure. So once you have that information, like, how do you apply it?
yeah. So from there, what I really like to do is identify, once I understand strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, I'll pick usually about 4 to 5 big ones out of those buckets. It doesn't necessarily need to be across the board, but the 5 most impactful that are going to help drive us to the next level in the upcoming year, I will pick those and focus on those to develop a strategy on, depending on what that thing is, either enhance the strength that already exists, or stabilize the weakness that exists and turn it into a strength, or pursue an opportunity that might be in front of us that we're not pursuing or not paying attention to, or eliminating a threat. Or a lot of times it will be about eliminating threats and taking advantage of opportunities and this sort of thing, but it could be across the board. But it's just a little bit of a subjective decision on my part on what I think is going to ultimately drive me in the business to the next level that I want to achieve. And we talked about this on the last podcast. That's different for everybody. For me, it's about lifestyle, having my time back, and making as much money. I mean, dude, if I had to, someone asked me the other day, they were like, how would you describe your brand? My brand is, you can have it all. Like that's truly what I believe. Do I have it all right now? No, I don't. But I'm tracking. I'm on my way. I'm putting things in place to ultimately have it all, and as I see it. And so yeah, that's kind of what I use to drive that.
Yeah, no, that's super solid. How often do you review it again once you've put it together?
Well, once you have a game plan, and you know exactly what you need to do, those are usually high level objectives and targets that you're trying to reach, which
Yeah.
is obviously important. That's your North Star. But the next step beyond that, once you know the direction and the goal that you're trying to achieve, is now to reverse engineer a process and a strategy. Essentially, strategy meaning the steps that you're going to take to get that. You need to then lay that out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the next step of, okay, so the first thing I need to do is this, and then I need to hire one of these, and then we need to, establish X, Y, and Z, and then we need to launch this. And so really kind of breaking it down step by step. And in the project management world, they call this a WBS, a work breakdown structure, which is basically just high level things that need to happen in order to achieve a final result. And then from there, there's another thing called decomposition of those work breakdown structures, where now you take that high level step, that thing that you're going to do, and break it down to an even more granular level to achieve that thing, right? Mm-hmm. So like to make it super simple, let's say your goal was to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, which is very basic, right? So like your high level work breakdown structure would be, first you get the bread, then you put it in the toaster, then you put the peanut butter on it, then you put the jelly on it, and then you put it together. Those would be the steps at a high level. But there are actually more granular steps to each of those that need to happen. And usually those are the details where people miss when they're like, cool, I'm going to make 7 figures this year. I know I need to make, 22 placements in order to do that. Cool. That's all I got to do. Well, yeah, that's not wrong, but there's a lot of little things that you're going to need to do in order to put it all together. And so that's kind of what the decomposition does for you. And really defining that so that you have a very clear path forward. And then the final thing is what they call putting together a network diagram. And so a network diagram is essentially, now that you have all of these little activities and action items that need to be executed to deliver this end result, the next thing that we need to do is we need to put it together in a plan, and an actionable plan and a roadmap, so that we know exactly what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, who's going to do it, how much it's going to cost. And then also beyond that, do we have to do step 1 first, and then step 2, and then step 3 in a linear thing where they're interdependent, where you can't do step 2 until step 1 is done? Or, which is usually the case, there are things that can happen simultaneously in parallel. And so identifying what those things are and who's going to do it, and make sure that we have resources and all of that, so that the runway is compressed as much as possible, meaning we're achieving those results as fast as we think we can. And so that's really, once you've done those 3 things, you've now got a solid plan. You know exactly who's going to do it, what needs to be done, how much it's going to cost, what resources you need, and how long do you think it's going to take. And so, yeah, having done that, going into the next year, you should stand a pretty damn good chance of achieving your goals. It's not always, 110%, but it's better than most, for sure.
Yeah, no, that's really solid. Now, question that I have, because I kind of I did this year, and like, what do you, so when you do this, you can have a plan, right? But things don't always go to plan. When you have something that kind of like diverts you off of that path, and like things aren't kind of like the way you laid it out, how do you handle that? Do you kind of revisit it and, okay, this is what I need to adjust? Or like, I don't know. What do you do specifically, kind of like when something like almost kind of derails that path?
Well, I went through this exact thing this year.
I know. So I wasn't sure how much you wanted to talk about it.
No, I'm cool. I'm totally fine with being open about that.
Cool.
Yeah, so it should require, if something does come up or things don't happen, and there's a couple of different flavors of how that can happen, right? It can happen in, we have this plan, and then we made a miscalculation when we created this plan. Like, that's one version of getting sidetracked.
And that's does happen, guys.
Totally, of course.
Yeah, don't feel bad.
And probably will happen, depending on the goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
The higher the goal, usually the more complex the game plan and the strategy to get there. And with more complexity presents the more opportunity for fuck ups, pardon my French. But yeah, that's a thing. And so, yeah, when those happen, I would say of the different flavors, that's probably the easiest one to resolve, because then you're in it, and you can kind of quickly assess what your options are. Okay, we thought this would be the right way, but it's clearly not. Okay, what are the other options that we have? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 3 is the best. Cool, we're going with 3. Then the only other thing to consider at that point is, does this impact anything further downstream in our strategy? If so, what do those changes look like? All good there, cool, change it, keep going. I would say those are
Eh,
the easier pivots to make.
Yeah, and a big thing, I actually learned this from you. A big thing that you have to be able to identify as you're going through these is like identifying the problems quickly, like as soon as possible, and knowing when it's a problem that like needs to be shifted and adjusted, and being able to do that early on. And a big
Yeah.
part of being able, in my opinion, I mean, I guess every business this would apply to really is when you're tracking numbers and you're tracking metrics and tracking like KPIs, however you do that, whether it's in sales or whatever else, you can start to identify when that issue is going to happen earlier. If you have all the right numbers and you have all the right information, you could track that earlier than before it becomes, hopefully before it becomes a really big problem.
Yeah.
And so just knowing when to shift and when to start looking into resources, or other resources, other ways to kind of do things. So
Preventative and proactive, man. You're absolutely right. And that
yeah.
is, and I know you've heard me say this a million times, but if you look at any best in class business in any industry, Coca-Cola, Amazon, McDonald's, Tesla, I mean, fill in the blank, they all are exceptional at different things, but the one thing and the one trait that most best in class organizations have is their ability to operate in a preventative and proactive way. They see the whole
Yep.
board, they know where the landmines are. If things start to go not according to plan, they are able to get in there immediately, triage it, get it fixed, so that the experience that their client is having with them is still exceptional, that they're not feeling any of that negative impact. Super, super important. Dude, there are other ways that things can not go according to plan, and I'll share my experience this year. And one of the biggest learning experiences, biggest
I'll share.
L's.
Yeah, after you're done, I'll share one about it as well, so we get like, hey,
Okay,
we,
all right,
we are
cool.
we are people too. These things, like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So go
yeah.
ahead.
Spoiler alert: life is not always sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you
When
take the
you're
wrong turn.
when you're an entrepreneur, I feel like it's half and half, or sometimes, or you can
Totally.
really go the other way. Yeah. So at least in the beginning, for sure.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so yeah, the biggest L that I took this year, and when I say L, I'm not talking about loss. I'm talking about learning experience. Is yeah. So in February of this year, or super early on, there was a situation that materialized where I was basically kind of on the spot put in a position to potentially start my own coaching program to help people start and scale their own recruiting business. Was not something that I was planning on doing on my own. I was supporting another program. It had been retained by someone else who had this business for the year and a half ish prior, and things in that relationship changed and ultimately put me in a position where I was either going to not do that anymore or start my own. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed coaching people. I enjoyed being part of their success. I enjoyed the benefits that I was getting out of it in my own business. It really forced me to stay extra sharp in my craft and strategies and just everything for others. And my business ultimately reaped the rewards of that, which I really, really liked. And of course, I saw an opportunity to make money. I mean, listen, I'm a business person. I'm a capitalist. I like making money, and so I'm
Yep.
probably not going to do it if that's not part of the equation. Maybe I'm a bad person. If you feel that way, then this podcast is probably not for you. but
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and so was not something that I had foreseen happening. And very early on in the year, my game plan going into that year was to continue to scale my business, but through a different strategy than what I had done the year before, through essentially bringing on more A players and some other strategic things in my business that I was excited and beginning to track to. Um, but when that happened, when I made the conscious decision to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to start my own coaching program, that completely derailed everything for me. And the coaching program has been great. There have been people that have come in and changed their lives, which is awesome. I love being a part of that. But yeah, it definitely has sidetracked me this year from the growth projections and goals that I had set for my own business, my own recruiting business, because one of the missteps that I had in making that decision was things that I had slated for me to own in that strategy to grow my business, now I was put in a spot where I had to make a quick knee jerk reaction on delegating that to certain people and not really thinking through what a solid, high probability contingent plan would be. And yeah, I made some wrong decisions, put some people in wrong seats, and was not involved as I should have been in certain aspects of my business. And yeah, my top line revenue numbers speak to that, plain and simple. So yeah, and then in addition to that, the launch of the program, candidly, was a little turbulent. It was, we had the saying when we launched it, "Hey, we're building this thing in the air," which is okay, but yeah, not having a clear plan out of the gate back in February on exactly how we were going to lay everything out was worked against us in the early months for sure. So yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times when you see opportunities, it's like you definitely want to go for it. But yeah, it's sometimes it's just like, you're gonna run into some learning process along the way. So it's completely fair. But once you get that, I mean, it levels out, and then you kind of are able to do both. But it's good, man. I appreciate you sharing that. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
definitely happens.
Real
Yeah,
life.
I think with me and mine, and I think this relates to kind of your situation as well, is like not identify. So when we talk about SWOT analysis and like not really identifying the threats, there were some that I didn't see as clearly. Sometimes you don't realize a problem until it's a problem, right? It's just life. But like I think especially when you're working in like our industry or any industry where it involves like technology that's constantly changing. And this can apply to a lot of different things, and I'll explain. So basically, if you go all in on like a certain technology or all in on like something that could change in 30 to 60 days, and then it does, and it doesn't go right, it can, and you let your business rely too much on that, it can really go bad. And that can be applied to, let's say you have like a vice president that does a lot of things for you, and what if that person leaves and now you're in a really bad place? Same, like, realize what the if your business is a house, realize the pillars that it's standing on and how strong
Right.
are those. And if one of those goes away, is your whole house going to fall down? Right. And like, that's I would say the biggest lesson that I've learned this year, and something I'm really taking in next year, is just identifying the threats really early. Like, if something were to happen with the technology that I use, or somebody that I have on my team, or somebody else in like a different like leadership position, is everything going to go bad if this goes out? And if so, how can I like minimize that risk and that threat as much as possible?
Right.
Because I didn't see one of those things this year, and it really like it was a lesson, man. And sometimes you can only learn lessons, not always only, but a lot of times you learn lessons by going through them. You can learn as much as possible from somebody else, but you're going to go through a lesson yourself at some point, and you got to like understand and know how to learn from those. And
What
that's
do you
definitely
think?
happened
What do you think your biggest threat going into 2024 is?
right now.
Yeah. If you just had, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
No,
if you
no,
had
no,
to
no,
think
no.
of one
It's
thing.
fine. I'm just trying to decide. It's actually two things. For me, if like, let's say, and this is something I've been trying to minimize and start, because I identified it by talking to you. One of my other friends, his name is Jace. I don't know if he might be listening to this at some point. Is just like a huge part of my business development outreach has been, I mean, I used to do pretty much nothing but cold calling, but now a huge part of the business development that I do now is relying on email marketing. And let's say Google and Outlook just somehow shut down like email marketing entirely, like, it would put me in a really bad place with my business. Yeah, I would figure it out. Yeah, I know how to cold call, luckily, and I could do all that kind of stuff. But I need to start having multiple ways. Sorry, my camera's out. I need to start having multiple ways to bring in business. So that includes like SEO, paid ads, having it, maybe even potentially having a team to kind of be doing cold calling, because so much of my business relies on email marketing that for some reason they were able to figure out a way to kind of like shut that down completely. I think it would put a lot of entrepreneurs in a really bad spot. Not even just me. It would put a lot of like, smaller businesses in a really bad spot. But if you think about it from Google's perspective, why wouldn't they do that in a way? It sounds bad, but like, it's like it would just drive everybody to have to do paid ads, which makes them a lot more money.
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
you're spot on with that, and I think that is one of the biggest threats, kind of moving forward. And to me, I think at this point, I know you and I have talked about this outside of the podcast, but I'll go ahead and mention it again for the audience. But for me, I think the writing on the wall with cold email is pretty clear. I think
Yeah.
that it has been over the last year and a half or so has been increasingly more challenging to do that effectively at scale over a long period of time. Like that second half of that statement, over a long period of time consistently, has become more and more challenging and is continuing to become even more challenging. And that is a major problem because that's the instability and the unpredictability of that channel to generate leads for your business is going to inject instability and volatility into your revenue or your earnings, which is a major problem. And yeah, man, I think the writing on the wall is pretty clear with cold email. Will it go away completely? Probably not. I think this cat and mouse game with cold emailers and ESPs, email service providers, will probably continue, but that's like betting against the house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Google, Microsoft, Zoho did it this year already. If they want to, they will squash us like a bug. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's not a matter of like, can they absolutely can. And there've been some pretty obvious things I think that are happening. Obviously the Zoho thing was major. But beyond that,
Do you want to kind of
Google
like
is,
explain what the Zoho thing was real quick? In the
yeah.
easiest way possible for people that don't understand that aren't in this.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially, you have three major ESPs, which stands for email service provider. These are people that allow emails to happen essentially without getting too technical. And yeah, Zoho, Google, and Microsoft Outlook are the three big ones. And this year, Zoho basically said, yeah, we're not going to support people that are cold emailing anymore. And literally, without notice, shut people's accounts down completely, indefinitely, forever. And in many cases, without refund, which basically caused folks to have to start completely over, which is a pain in the ass. It's problematic, especially if you're in startup mode. That's a really hard thing to weather, because you're probably already strapped a little bit and there's already a lot of uncertainty because you haven't achieved proof of concept and all of that. So it's a problem. And now there's grumblings that Google is starting to do that. And there was an even more obvious indication, in my opinion, about 2 months ago when they announced, 2 or 3 months ago, I think it was like June or July, when they announced that they were selling off their email division, their domains division, to Bluehost.
Yeah.
That was super obvious because let me tell you something. They didn't sell that division of their business because it wasn't profitable. You know what I mean? That's not why they got rid of it. They got rid of it because it's pretty obvious that they're taking a pretty clear stance on cold email and spam and all of that. And they don't they need to kind of separate themselves from the conflict of interest of being a domains inbox provider and also enabling people to do that while also trying to combat it, for the lion's share of their usership as it relates to email. And Microsoft will probably do the same thing. And when those things happen, what are you going to do? If you're only cold emailing people, you're going to be probably screwed. So
Yeah, yeah, and the Zoho thing was one of the things that when I was referencing earlier that happened to me, and
yeah,
honestly put me in a really bad place, too, because it's just like, okay, we had to switch everything out. Basically, emailing was out for not out. I mean, yeah, you transitioned and stuff, but like, if anybody that doesn't do email marketing that doesn't understand like how this works, imagine if like everybody like imagine you have like a cold calling center, and everybody that works for you in cold calling just calls out for 6 weeks. like,
yeah,
like you know what I mean?
right.
Like that's like the best way to describe it. Is like that's essentially like it was like your BD just got shut down for like a month and a half or so because you still have to warm it up. There's like a lot of things that are involved with it. And so, that was a huge wake up call to probably myself and a lot of other people. And I think, the same things are happening with Google and Outlook. And that's that. I mean, for sure, man. When you ask what the biggest threat is, I mean, that's going to be it right now. Cause I mean, you, I don't know, like it's easy come, easy go, where it's just like right now, I mean, just a year or two ago. Remember, we were just sending tons of emails out of like one day.
It was
It was just
stupid.
like it was
It was
like shooting
stupid.
fish in a
Yeah,
barrel, man.
it was.
And so it's just becoming harder and harder, and it really is a cat and mouse game. You know, the mouse being us and the cat being Google, which is a big cat. And so eventually, like it's just like, you know, you're trying to stay away from them shutting it down, and they're just chasing after you, and they're just trying to figure out ways to shut you down, and you're trying to just stay a little further ahead of it. And eventually, man, with the amount of money and the resources they have, I'm sure they can figure out a way, or it's going to take a while for somebody to figure out how to get out of it. You know, it could be, yeah, I don't know.
Well, but this is a great example when we were talking about a minute ago, being preventative and proactive in your
Yeah.
business and seeing the whole board. This is a great example of that. You can still cold email. I'm still cold emailing people today,
Yeah.
full disclosure.
Same.
And I will continue to cold email people along with other things though, because I'm not going to find myself being that guy or gal who, when shit really does hit the fan and there really is no way to cold email anybody anymore, and me trying to figure out and scramble, like, okay, well, how am I going to stay in business now? It's not going to be me. I can see it coming. The trajectory is clear. And so now our goal and our objective is to begin to execute countermeasures to make sure that we don't impact that. So I'm not saying stop cold emailing. I'm cold emailing. I'm going to continue to do that, but I'm also doing that as a part, as a sliver of the pie that represents my entire marketing and business development strategy, which also includes a number of other channels that we're using, as well as organic and expert positioning and all of the other stuff that helps build trust and create a warm audience, essentially. So, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one thing that the cold emailing situation taught me too was just like the value that like that your clients have, like your good clients, and treating them well, and how much business they can bring you. Because like I'll say before, like I was just bringing on so many different clients, and it was cool, but it was like I feel like I wasn't like nurturing those clients as well because I was bringing in so many at one point, which sounds like, you know, oh, like you have too many clients. But it kind of was a problem because we were just like focused on different, as opposed to like this year, once the Zoho thing, for example, happened, and we were having issues with emails. I really learned how to like nurture and grow the relationships that I have with the current clients, and those have become so strong. They provided us with so many opportunities. Then in the weirdest way, it was like kind of like a really like, now if I had been like just starting my business, that would have been a really bad spot. I'm gonna between you and I, like that would have been,
Yeah.
and everybody listen, that would have been would have been bad. But
Me and you and all five other people that
yeah,
are listening.
yeah, exactly. But like, you know, thankfully I did have a good book of business, and I really was able to dive further into that. And it just showed me like, you know, now I appreciate those clients. I always appreciate my clients, but like I really, really like have grown a good relationship with them, and it grows further, and they give you more and more business. And so, you know, but also one problem that I see, like not really necessarily in our industry, because I feel like you're always getting new clients in. But actually, this could apply to like the staffing side of things. That I've heard of this happening with some staffing agencies that you have to be really careful of, and a pillar that in business that you have to be really careful of is like, and Grant Cardone talks about this sometimes, where it's like if X percent, like I think it's like, you know, let's say like 60% of your business comes from one client, like that is a huge threat. Like, because if that person leaves you, like, or if something happens with that relationship, like you are in a really bad spot. So like identify those kind of threats too when thinking about clients. Like, you know, obviously you don't want to bring on too many clients that you can't handle them all. But like, hey, if anything were to happen to your main client, are you still going to be good? And if not, then you need to be diversifying a little bit too, you know?
Totally, totally. I'm with you on that 100%. Um, Not only in our business of recruiting, but in almost every other business that exists out there, you have to at some point figure out a way to take what you do and what you're providing to the markets that you serve, take that from a place of being transactional to an actual true long-term partnership,
Mm-hmm.
trusted advisor, so on and so forth, like what you're describing. How have you in the past been able to move new clients from transactional, taking a flyer on your services, to trusted partner? You're now an extension of our HR department.
Yeah, sure. I would say that the first thing is identifying who those clients are that you want to be that
Mm,
like strong partnership. So in the recruiting game in our industry, it's I think the most, and tell me if you think otherwise, but I think you'll probably agree, is like the most valuable thing in our industry is having like a good, responsive, like solid client. Like more than the positions, more than like anything else, it's just like somebody that's like, hey, this person, like every time I send a candidate over, they respond quickly, they get through their interview process quickly. They're like, that is like so valuable to me. So like when I identify those things, I'm like, okay, this is like, especially if they can continually give us roles, I'm like, this is the one that you treat well. This is
right.
this is your partner. You got to make sure that they're really good. So I guess once I identify who those people are, um, we talked about it this year, and this is one thing I've learned from you, and I've really kind of grown and elaborated on is the best thing that you can do when you're providing a service is be able to kind of also take like a consultative approach. So when you can teach your client something and when you can help them develop their strategy and you become like a genuine partner, like it's like you're an extension of their team. You're pretty much like it can become so close you're almost like a part of their team, and like if you weren't there with them, they would also be in a bad spot. We have that, that kind of relationship with some people as well, which is really cool. And so, you're able to have like open conversations with whether it's in recruiting that HR person, but with their team, and be able to kind of understand, hey, what is the strategy, what is your HR strategy that you guys have right now, how much are you trying to grow, what are those kind of positions that you're looking to bring on. Okay, this is the type of person that fits that mold, this is who you need to hire, and being able to like suggest that to them, especially once you've identified that this is a good partner. You don't want to just, I wouldn't say to do this for everybody because you could end up wasting a lot of time and then they don't even use you. So identify that good partner first. And then just being able to kind of develop a strategy along with them. And then you're kind of so locked in at that point that you've built up this like ideal candidate profile, I guess we could call it in this case, that they understand exactly what they need, and they know that you help them kind of identify that need, and now you're basically just going out and looking for that person, and you like if you can develop that kind of partnership and then you actually execute on it and find those types of people, like you're good, man. And you continue to do that, like they see that and they'll come to when they have a new role or they have a new situation come up, you're going to be the first person that they think of and they're going to come to you. And that's been happening a lot in the past like 2 to 4 months for me.
Awesome. Love
Yeah.
it. 100%. 100%. Very cool.
Yeah. So anything you would add to that part?
I mean, I think you nailed it. I agree with everything that you said there. I think that one of the things that is always important in order to move them from, transactional to partner, um, is really understanding what their blind spots are as it relates to the service that you're offering and the problem that you're trying to solve for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the devil is in the details there. In recruiting, and hate to keep banging on recruiting, we can talk about other industries as well, but
Yeah.
this is kind of just part of the conversation here. In recruiting, the idea of recruiting and what most recruiters will do is, and the way they find themselves being transactional is, okay, send me a job description. Maybe you do a discovery call and you understand a few more details about what they're looking for. And then you go and screen candidates and push resumes. That's it.
Yeah.
And that's at the end of the day, that is what they are paying you to do, or will potentially pay you to do, is to get them qualified candidates that they would at some point hire that will solve the problems that they have. But the gap that is often missed, and really where our value should truly come into play, and make a difference for the partners that we're working with, is the blind spots that they have around hiring. And that's totally different than just pushing resumes. And a lot of hiring managers, a lot of functional leaders within organizations, either are aware or feel uncertain or unconfident about their ability to workforce plan and understand from a personnel standpoint what it is that their business actually needs. And then beyond that, even if they do understand what those needs are, not saying that us as recruit, I'll kind of elaborate on that here in a minute, but
Yep.
Beyond that, then how do you take that and go and attack a highly competitive candidate market to attract the best people, to make them just super excited, ready to run through a wall, to come in and join their team, connecting all of those dots around making that happen. And ultimately, the only thing that matters is solving the problem that they have through that role. Is that going to happen? Yes or no? Because oftentimes people will hire folks and then realize, shit, that didn't fix anything. We still have the same problem. Well, it's because you're fixing the wrong problem. And so I want to kind of go back to what I just said in terms of like workforce planning and helping them understand what their needs are in their business. You have to be super careful here, at least as a recruiter, because um, you cannot go into it with a thought of like, I know your business better than you do, because you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what you can do is help facilitate a conversation and ask questions to the people that do know their business well enough and lead them to those answers, right? In terms of, what does your business need? What are the gaps functionally that you have? How do we take those gaps and then create a profile of a person that can come in and bridge those gaps? Does that person exist? Is it one person, or is it 3 people, or is it 10 people? Those are the types of things and questions and conversations that you can facilitate by asking questions and driving a conversation to help them come up with their own answers that ultimately help you go and find the right person for them to solve their problems. And then when their problems get solved, and it's as a result of that exercise of going through that with them, boom, you are the man or the woman that they're always going to turn to, forever and always. And that's how those partnerships, those relationships are really solidified.
It's funny because it's like it's funny that we talked about this at the beginning of this podcast, but it's almost like you're doing a SWOT analysis, like with
Kind of.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's like you could almost like do a similar thing and and be able to kind of help walk them through that. So and this, and for anybody listening to this that's maybe not in the recruiting, this can apply to a lot of different things. I mean, I used to sell software, and like the same thing is, especially when you're selling like software as a service or something like that. Like this can be applied to the same thing. It's basically just understanding, what their needs are, and not just like selling them the tool or like selling them whatever they need, but helping them understand like in a way why they need it, but then also developing a plan with them as well. And that's why like a lot of like software, for example, is just the one I'm thinking of right now, but it's just like that's why you can tackle on the second sale is always the easiest. So once you kind of like have sold them on your tool or stuff, that's why it's like if you do it right, it's so easy to tackle on like consulting and like other things, and like let me show you how to like do this, like as well, as opposed to just just buying the tool, buying whatever I'm trying to sell you. It's like Home Depot can sell you like a saw or whatever else, but okay, what if what if they have a guy that can also come to your house and help you fix it for you? You know what I'm saying? It's just like it's you have to understand like where you can put on those additional resources. What we do in recruiting, it all kind of applies to the same thing. So
No doubt. I mean, the starting point in any business for me that's always served me well is starting with the voice of the client, the VOC.
yeah,
What do they want? What are they telling you they need? And that makes it as clear as it's ever going to be. Don't deliver things that they're not asking for. Make sure that you're crushing the things that they are asking for, and
hmm
use that to reverse engineer everything else.
yep,
The product that you're designing, service that you're delivering, the process that you're going to execute to deliver those things. Make sure that it's going to get it to them in the time that they want, and the price that they want, and the level of quality that they want, and all of that. And then once that's defined, you have a process to execute. Now all of a sudden you can back out of the process and understand the skill set that is needed to execute each of those things. And oftentimes it's multiple skill sets depending on what you're doing. And then boom, from there you have job descriptions. And now from there we can, so on and so forth. So, but it's all feeding to what the client is asking you to do.
yep,
So super important. As long as you use that as your North Star, you're good to go. You won't be led astray. So
yep. Completely agree, man. Cool. Do you want to here want to take one of the questions from one of our listeners real quick?
yeah, we can take one and then
We'll
wrap it
we'll
up. I
do
got
one
about
real
15
quick.
minutes.
Yeah, wrap it
Yeah.
up. We got about 15 minutes. Okay. Some of these we've already kind of covered a little bit. All right. I'm going to ask you when, all right, here's the question. When you were first starting out, what were the biggest mistakes you made and how did you correct them?
Oh.
Also, yeah, okay. That second question is not really related to the first, so I'm gonna leave it at that.
The biggest mistakes that I made when I was first starting out, and how did I correct them? Well, I've been pretty public about this. In my first year, I nearly went bankrupt. I did a staffing contract with a client that was insolvent and basically didn't pay their bills. They ended up going bankrupt, and yeah, left me on the hook with basically all of my life savings hanging in the wind and nothing to show for it. And so, yeah, basically, the major mistake that I made there was um, not doing proper due diligence on folks that I was about to partner with, especially when it involved me putting my own cash on the table and accepting that level of risk. Because had I done that, had I done a DMB check or something like that, I would have been able to see that this was probably not someone that I wanted to drop 30 welders on their site and pay those welders salaries for 6 weeks straight, working 60, 70 hour weeks each, without any guarantee of getting paid back. So yeah, that was the due diligence was definitely one of them. But I think if you were to do a root cause analysis on that, which I've done, kind of like a 5 why process, really, if you were to kind of dissect that and break it down to its most granular level, is my biggest failure there in finding myself in a situation like that was not networking with people that were already ahead of me in this business and making sure that I had the lay of the land. I was a little arrogant when I got started. I had done research, of course, online and this sort of thing, and just talking to different vendors and my own experience as a decision maker working with staffing firms when I was a manager. But I didn't actually talk to staffing firm owners beforehand and say, hey, like, what are some other things that this is kind of way I'm seeing things like, but what am I missing here? I didn't do that. I completely skipped that. And I'm pretty sure in the staffing game, if I had talked to somebody who knew what was up, they probably would have mentioned like, hey, before you go and, outlay $150,000, you need to make sure that these people pay their bills. Which I didn't, that totally escaped me. You know what I mean? And so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, man. And good advice will save you a ton of time, and bad advice will waste a lot.
Great quote. Yeah. 100%.
I just made that
So
up.
that was, yeah.
Quote of the podcast.
Vincent Pennix. Yeah. Yeah. But no, that was definitely my biggest mistake for sure. So yeah, but luckily I was able to recover out of that, and yeah, now I network with a shitload of people, and I'm constantly asking questions and paying attention and learning, and that sort of thing. So,
But it's funny though, because like look at what that mistake kind of brought, because it's like, okay, that was a mistake, but that led you to a lesson that I need to network more. That networking brought you to not only making your business, I know this from between you and I, but your business significantly better, kind of following that. But now people are pretty much networking with you, and now you have a coaching program. All is probably indirectly as a result of that knowing and making that mistake in the first place.
Totally.
So it's weird how that works out.
Yeah, and if you are joining a program, not to plug a coaching program, but if you're joining any coaching program, if it's a good program, that's what you're paying for, is really flattening that learning curve, not making those mistakes, the questions that you don't know to ask, that you're not asking, all of that. Basically, Tony Robbins has a great saying, turn months and years into days and weeks, essentially. And so, yeah, if you're in a good program, then that's what it should be doing for you. That's the value there. So
that's a good quote. I mean, I never heard that. But that's exactly what it is. You could condense somebody's 10-year experience maybe not 10 years, but several years of experience. I mean, depends
Could
into,
be.
could
We
be
were talking
into
about Alex
potential.
Hormozy before, dude. That dude was in the
Exactly.
shitter for 7 years straight before he crushed it with Gym Launch. So
Yeah. How long do
um,
you think it's like, how long do you think it took him to figure all that stuff out that he can now teach us that we can figure out in
seven
6 months?
years. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's well
And it's,
documented at this
eh,
point.
yeah, and
So
it's wild. And it's like, and maybe that's going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the podcast. Maybe it's like sometimes why when people haven't like fully like been through a program or gone through enough struggles themselves, it's like hard for them to realize the value that they really have. It's like, dude, this person's giving me so much that they had to go through so much to do that. But it's like because I now didn't have to go through the struggle. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe that's a part of it. So I
could
get
be.
it, man.
How about you?
So as far as the biggest mistake I made when I started, I think it's funny because it's like now obviously I'm getting really good at this and I'm getting better about this year was again it was a different threat, but it was not identifying a threat like early enough. And this can apply to anything. Unless you're in a partnership when you start a business, like if you're the actual owner of the business, you have to be really careful on not allowing your business to rely on anybody else too much. Because if
Yeah,
you once you have like employees or whatever, like remember, like employees can leave you and will leave you most likely at some point. And if too much of your business relies on like one person, especially in the recruiting game, like if you're doing all the BD and somebody else is doing like recruiting or whatever else, what happens if that person leaves? Like, and you need to like identify that like very early and what's going to happen and be able to have a plan for that. And be constantly, it goes to your thing, be networking, also be interviewing for your business for different roles that, you know, maybe aren't open at the time, but just be open to that. Like, and I think my big mistake was like, I was just too reliant on one person. And when that person left for and sometimes it's not like that they had an issue with you. It can be like legitimate like family reasons or health reasons or whatever else.
right.
And that's what happened. And it was like dude, things happen to people, bro. Like people get sick, people like whatever else. And like what happens when that person is gone? Like they may be a reliable person, but like anything could come up. And just like especially when you're starting off in a business, like know that it's all coming back to you. And even if you have a partner, like be careful on like I don't know because I'm not in that situation, but be careful with partnerships too. That's a whole different. We could probably do a whole podcast
We could do
on
a whole one. Yeah.
yeah on partnerships, but like just be careful if your business is too much reliant on like let's say one technology or one person. Identify your threats very early and be real about it, man. Don't just be like this is my thing is like when you're optimistic you're like it'll be cool, it'll be okay, it works out, but like yeah it may be cool and it may be okay, but if it doesn't, have a plan and like know what you're going to do and be able to identify what those threats are. And if one of those once again if one of those pillars on your house is going to get knocked out, is it still going to stand? And knowing how to just be able to make the appropriate shifts and work that out.
Amen. Amen. All right, man. It's been fun. I
Cool.
gotta run.
Same.
Have enjoyed it. Number 2 is in the books. I mean,
Number
man,
two's in the books. Yeah, and we'll
I'm
start
proud
we'll
of
start having
us.
some guests on. I don't know if you want to do that
Yeah.
within the next 2 to 3,
Yeah.
sometimes.
That's,
Yeah,
that's
we'll have
good.
to
I like
coordinate
that.
some schedules, you know.
We'll discuss.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, sounds good, man. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.
All right, man.